Welcome to the PEEP Podcast. I'm your host, Nicolle, and on this episode, we're talking to Chris Cogswell of the Mad Scientist podcast about Sky-Hub. You might have heard me mention Sky-Hub in a previous episode. I joined the organization last fall with the goal of helping out with science communication and data analysis. At about the same time, I had the inspiration for this podcast and also decided I really should finish writing at least one of the 3 novels I've started. Long story short, I'd love to actively participate in Sky-Hub, but I just haven't found time to fit everything, including a day job, into my jam-packed days. So I thought, hey, I bet my listeners would appreciate all the work they're doing over there. Now you might be asking, what is Sky-Hub? Sky-Hub is a growing group of volunteers from all walks of life who are building a better mousetrap to capture not mice, but UFOs. Now popularly known as unexplained aerial phenomenon, or UAP, and they need help. It's basically a citizen science project spanning the globe, and it's totally cloud-based and transparent. In case you're interested in learning more after you listen to our conversation, I'll have a link in the show notes, or you can just go to skyhub.org. That's SKYHUB.org. Chris Cogswell holds a PhD in chemical engineering and hosts the Mad Scientist podcast, which is a fun show to listen to that gets you thinking critically about a wide range of topics, from the discovery of King Tut's tomb to conspiracy theories to squid biology. Seriously, y'all, check it out. Let's dive in with Chris. Hi, Chris. Thanks for joining me tonight to talk about Sky-Hub. But before we delve into Sky-Hub, I want to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you interested in UAPs and UFOs.
Yeah, so my background is, I am the chair of the Scientific Advisory Board for Sky-Hub. I'm also the host of the Mad Scientist podcast, which is a show that looks at the science and philosophy behind paranormal and weird claims. And so my interest in the subject, I guess, really started when I was a kid. So my family my mom's side of the family, which is really the side of the family I grew up with, is originally from Italy, from a small town on the coast, near kind of southern Italy. And when they came over here from Italy, they brought with them a lot of superstitions and stories from the old country and those sorts of things that people, think about when they talk about relatives from those places. And so it was really, growing up, I had kind of a mix between both my family, who were industrious and really dedicated to education and really dedicated to, making sure that their kids here in America, once they got here, that they made the most of that opportunity for themselves. But also, at the same time, your grandma's telling you how great it is that you're doing well in school. She's also telling you that, you can cure diabetes by drinking a witch's brew every morning of random yogurts and stuff that she put together. So kind of an interesting view of the world, I guess. And so growing up, I was really exposed to different ways of thinking, both scientifically and also really not so scientifically. And so as I got older, I was always interested in these sorts of subjects about people who made claims about things like, cryptids or UFOs or, demonic possession or any of those kind of things that we would put under the umbrella of kind of the weird, I guess. And always was interested in it from kind of a skeptical viewpoint. But when I got to be in college, as an undergraduate, I did a dual degree in chemical engineering and philosophy, and my philosophical research, or the parts of philosophy that really interested me, were the kind of economics, this and the social, the social dynamics of science and belief in conspiracy theory and skepticism. So, why is it that some scientific ideas become acceptable to society very quickly while others sort of lag behind for a long period of time? It's an interesting question, but it's not one that we often think about. In the U.S. especially, I think we sort of take for granted that we are viewed as leaders in the world of science, but that wasn't always true. And in fact, there's a long history of us lagging behind other countries. Even today, we lag behind in things like, say, sustainability or green energy or chemistry. So those stories and why it is that happens, and then the same, I would argue, of the same coin, but the other side of it, why is it that in some societies, non-scientific ideas, things like conspiracy theory, things like belief in, I don't know, the Loch Ness Monster or witchcraft or whatever, why is it that those persist in some societies, but they can't seem to get a foothold in others? And so that kind of led me to being interested in all these subjects and studying them really sort of, I guess, as an adult. And the one that I've always thought held the most water and was the most interesting was the kind of UFO, UAP question. So that's really how I got sort of, I guess, initially interested. For a short period of time, maybe about a year to like a year and a half, I was the director of research for MUFON because I was doing this podcast and talking to skeptics and scientists who were interested in UFOs but had never really taken the plunge before to get involved. And basically they all sort of at once kind of came together and said, if you're really that interested in this and you really think that there's stuff that you can do to make this, less harmful to people, more useful to people, whatever kind of, any of those sorts of things, why don't you get involved? Right? Like if all you're going to do is complain on a podcast, that kind of stinks. Right? So like put your money where your mouth is. So I decided to do that. So I joined MUFON, and then within like a year was unfortunately rewarded with that faith in MUFON by them retaining links to an extremely virulent brand of racism that I wanted nothing to do with. Mm-hmm. So I found out that was continuing and left immediately and tried to, I guess, sort of blow the whistle on that still occurring. So that made me a lot of friends in UFO world. And then on my podcast and in my kind of on Twitter and in articles and things, I've been very outspoken about my concerns with Robert Bigelow's involvement in the subject and the lack of results for the last 30 years. And, the issues around things like, say, To the Stars Academy and trying again to sort of tamp down expectations and have people focus or try to get people to focus on things that I believe are where real results can be driven. So, and that's also made me a lot of friends on Twitter. And so now I just can't, I'm assuming if I showed up to a UFO convention, I'd probably get a tomato thrown at me or something, but it should be fine. I like tomatoes, so it's okay.
Yeah, you can make a salad with it.
Yeah, it's fine. It's great.
It's good. Yeah. Cool. So you have not personally had a UFO experience, or have you?
I have not. So actually, I've talked about this on my podcast and in interviews and stuff before. But so when I was a kid, I've always had, and still to this day have, very vivid dreams. And nightmares especially tend to remain vivid for me. And so when I was a kid, I would have very, very vivid nightmares. And sometimes those would take on the, I guess, guise of or the appearance of something that maybe people would consider to be, well, maybe that's a UFO abduction or maybe that's something like that. And so when I was a kid, I was like pretty terrified of all of that stuff. And then as I got older and sort of spoke to my mom about it and my family members about it, I just think we all kind of suffer from a medical issue that causes dreams like that. So my own experience, it's interesting. It's also why I think I try to be very empathetic to people who are experiencers or who believe they're experiencers, because you don't know for sure until, you can't know if you're a real experiencer or not. But the reason I'm so empathetic to people who feel like they've had an experience like this of some sort, regardless of the source of it, is because, had my family been different, had my family been just a little bit more on the believer side than on the skeptical side, I might be on your show right now talking about my abduction experiences.
Yeah.
It's really like, so I understand that feeling, and I understand the fear and everything else. Although again, mine have always been dreams. So I think someone who's said that they've had a real genuine experience, theirs would be different in kind than what I've experienced. And I'm sure it would be. But it's always something that I think about and try to keep in the back of my mind to say, no matter how kind of outlandish the claim to my sensibilities, this is a real person who's claiming that this happened to them. So you have to be empathetic to them.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like with just about any other experience, really. I mean, if somebody tells you that they hear voices that tell them the future, you don't want to immediately say, oh, well, you're crazy. It could be that they are actually experiencing precognition in a way that their perception is telling them that it's a voice telling them the future.
Exactly. Like there's, I think that it's something that I think we do need to be careful about, of course, because, I don't care if it's an alien, I don't care what the source of the voice is. If there's a voice telling you to do harm to yourself or other people, don't listen to it. Right. But, so I think it is a fine line though, and as someone who themselves has spoken about and been open about my own struggles with, anxiety and OCD and things like that, it's another big part of this, I think, is that there is really a stigma around, there's a real stigma around mental health, and we don't talk to each other really about how we cognate, and how we think, like the function or the structure of our thinking. And it's actually it's an experiment I do actually on almost every show I go to. So I'm going to do it with you here, actually, and your listeners.
Okay.
So, when you think about a bouncing red ball, what do you think about? What does that look like, or how does that happen in your mind?
Honestly, when you say a bouncing red ball, I hearken back to, I think it might have been like Sesame Street.
Okay.
When you're watching it and they've got music and they're teaching you how to read the words that you're singing.
Okay. So all right.
That's the visual I get.
So that's the visual you get, right? Is from childhood of kind of a bouncing red ball. So you don't see it. You don't necessarily. You basically see when you think then, or when you think about that sentence, you essentially see like kind of a TV vignette, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When I think of a bouncing red ball, it takes effort for me to visually see something in my mind. I think of the sentence.
Okay.
I hear it. I hear a bouncing red ball. That's what I think of when I think of a bouncing red ball. So for me, cognition is different than for you.
Right.
So is it really that odd to think that we might experience an event differently, or I might experience something weird that you would never experience, or vice versa? We think about something as stupid and simple as a bouncing red ball differently.
Right.
Right. And every person I've ever asked that thing, they give me a different answer. Most people tend to think of a visual representation, right? And that's what I try to do, and I can do it, but my go-to is my own voice saying to myself, a bouncing red ball. Everyone's is a little bit different though. You're the first person to mention Sesame Street, but I've had people say things like, I think about a ball from when I was a kid, or I think about a cartoon ball or a sphere in 3D space, or right, like people cognate differently. So, and because we don't talk about that with each other, when you have something maybe scary happen to you, that's just a little thing, you likely just brush it off as, well, this is just, I don't know what that was, but I'm going to ignore it or whatever. Mm-hmm. But some people can't ignore it. And, maybe part of it is that people will say, well, that's you being open to the other side of reality or whatever. Maybe, or maybe other people are just, their brains are just better wired for thinking about weird stuff. They can't let go of it,
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is, but it's an interesting question. So
Yeah, it really is. And that is a different way to think of it. I've never had the bouncing rod ball experiment, so thanks for that.
No, it's such a weird one. Like, I don't think I personally would have realized how weird that process is, or what that's hinting at is that our consciousness is, even though we are we have the same type of brain, and we live basically, for all intents and purposes, between the two of us versus, say, one of us in like a goat or something, we've basically lived about the same experience, right?
Right.
But even us who have, we have differences, of course, but basically the same sensory apparatus, the same structure of it, everything else, we think differently than each other. I don't think I would have realized that had it not really been pointed out to me in you read the philosophy of like existentialists, and they're always talking about the weird thoughts, the weird intrusive thoughts they have. And I sort of wonder to myself now if Sartre or Camus had Lexapro, would they have written the great philosophy that they had? But it is interesting, right? We don't think about that with each other, so we don't really even know what a normal day of thinking is like, because we don't talk about it.
Yeah. Very interesting. Okay, I'm gonna take a step back from the deep philosophical thoughts that we're having.
Right. That's good.
And I'm gonna ask you about Skyhub. So
yeah, absolutely.
So could you kind of explain how Skyhub came about, what it is, of course, and why it's as special as it is? Because I truly do think it's special.
Skyhub is a sensory observational platform for objects in the sky. So what I mean by that is we are starting with basically a camera, a fisheye lens that has, it's attached to and running through a Jetson Nano computer, kind of a mini computer, I guess, that has the ability to do things like optical flow analysis and machine learning. So essentially what we're doing is when an object comes into frame above a Skyhub camera, or a unit, what we call them units, the system will turn on and start recording. And then eventually, as we keep developing, the internals of the Skyhub system, so all of that video gets uploaded to the cloud, and then from the cloud it is then analyzed. So things like the apparent motion of the object, the apparent velocity, apparent acceleration at any point, all of those metrics can be analyzed and then statistically siloed. So what I mean by that is we would expect that an average bird, no matter where we take a video of it, will have limitations on how fast they can go, the kind of acceleration they'll do, the kind of pathing they'll take, the size that they'll appear, all those sorts of things, right? We anticipate that will be a specific, or it'll have rather a general distribution to it, or a normal distribution, I guess is what I should say. Mm-hmm. So by learning a lot about known objects, things like airplanes or drones or birds or insects or people walking in front of the camera or whatever, we should then be able to tell when something that doesn't fit those statistical parameters occurs. So something out of the ordinary. And that is what we are terming unknowns. Most people, if they saw something like that, would probably think it's a UFO or a UAP or something. And then from that data, we can then analyze further, are there commonalities between those objects? Right? So for example, do they have a maximum apparent acceleration that we see? Or do they appear to occur at certain times of day more often, or time of night? Do they tend to appear near certain locations versus others, right? That's really what we're trying to do. Now, in the next iteration of this project, we are also going to include a better camera. So the fisheye is for the initial kind of siloing and categorization, and then a better camera is there to take a good photo of whatever we're seeing. And so really the goal is to use this to capture observational scientific data of the sky and atmosphere above us, not just to look for, say, UFOs, which is where other projects that have focused on this question of, well, it's a common refrain, right? If there's UFOs out there, everyone's got a camera. Why don't you just have a camera running 24 hours a day, right?
Right.
That sounds really easy, but who watches all 24 hours of footage? Who digs through it? How do you tell the difference between a UFO and a bug or an airplane that's far away or a satellite right? It's not a simple problem. And so we're kind of making it more complicated because it's a more complicated problem. And so we realize that, if for example, Nikki, I asked you, what do you think a UFO looks like? Right?
Right.
You might have a list of like 10 things, right? That this is what UFOs do. I bet this is what UFOs do. That already adds implicit bias to the model, right? Because we're now looking for only things that Nikki thinks UFOs look like. And that's probably not as I'm sure good as your info on UFOs is. That's not what we want to do, right? We want to look for what these unknowns are. So the best we can do is get really, really good at telling what knowns are and what the known objects look like and how they behave in front of our cameras. And then from that, we can really dig down to a good set of unknown objects. And interestingly, we've already had objects in the cameras that are not what we would expect in some ways. So we've actually already had success, which is crazy to think because there's only 12 of them and they've only been running really for like a couple of months. But we've already captured things that I think most people would consider to be interesting. Now, I don't think that they're really UFOs, right? Of course, I don't think we have enough data to say that. But I do think that these are kind of the videos that often appear on YouTube or on Twitter or TikTok or wherever. And people say, well, look, I caught a UFO, right? If we were charging $1,000 a night for our desert tour and you saw an object like this in the sky, you would think you'd gotten your money's worth.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, but it's very exciting. So, and there have been other efforts like this in the past to do something like this. There's UFO DAP. There's MADAR was another one. There were some other ones too. I know Christopher O'Brien had one too, or has one too. This actually might be UFO DAP, but the difference between those and what we're trying to do is we're in a weird way not looking for UFOs. We're looking for birds and planes and satellites and stars, and we're looking for knowns. And then as a byproduct of getting really good at looking for knowns, we will have a really good set of unknowns. And also different than those other projects, all of our software, data, everything is open source. So you listening right now could go to skyhub.org and go to our Git repository and download all of our software, all of our code, right?
Right.
So it's all totally open.
And anybody can do it.
Yes.
You don't have to have a PhD to get involved.
No, you do not have to have a PhD to get involved or help. We have a lot of great people who are just just in the chat, giving us ideas and talking to us and asking questions. We have a lot of great people who are actually became part of the team, and they're mostly just getting questions from the community, or they are reaching out to people on places like, LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever, and just kind of spreading the word. I mean, the good thing about a project like this too, and one of the reasons why I got involved with it is because it also does create an opportunity for the community of people who are interested, say, in UFOs to get close to and work alongside scientists and engineers really interested in the UFO question. So it's kind of a nice double-edged endeavor like that, right? You can not only, if we never capture a UFO, but we get people who are interested in this subject access to people, say at like SETI or, astronomers or engineers or wherever, that's a victory, right?
Right.
If on the other, and it's a victory for both sides, right? Because science has been really bad at talking to the public about what real science is. So it's like a perfect mix, right? This is the right moment to do this. And on the other hand, if we capture something cool on video, that's also a victory. So
yeah, and the video is available. Like it's not hiding on some government computer. It's if a UFO gets captured, it's out there.
Yes.
And it's not going to get taken down by the CIA, or whatever conspiracy government entity you want to go with.
If the government is paying attention to what we're doing, I will be very shocked. There's, it's all open, it's all available. And the goal is once, right now we don't have a lot of units in production. We have them in testing, right? So we're still testing, we're still building this system. But so once they go into full production mode and actually kind of start living out there in the world on their own, those videos that go uploaded and the data that results from it will be publicly available. So, yep, it'll all be available.
Cool. And speaking of videos, there are 2 from May of last year that are on skyhub.org. So if you go to skyhub.org under media, click on videos, there are 2 events that were captured. I think it was in Houston.
Yes.
And the video is right there for you to watch. And I like how, the airplane going along the bottom of the screen is labeled, and so you can see in comparison to the other knowns what this unknown is doing. One thing I noticed is that it seems to be blinking.
Yes.
And usually when you see something blinking, people say, oh, that's got to be terrestrial because the FAA requires landing lights, blah, blah, blah. And, my question is always, well, who made the rule that UFOs can't have blinking lights, first off? That goes back to, I think I know what a UFO is, and that's the way it should behave.
Yes.
But do you have any thoughts you want to share on those videos?
Yeah, so I mean, the videos are really interesting. So the thing that I think is probably the most, the part of it that I think is the most interesting with those is that the object, whatever it is, appears to sort of stop in midair and then shoot off. And it does so in a way that leaves behind a trail of some kind.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. So it sort of happens in a way that I guess I wouldn't have expected. But it kind of perfectly shows what we're talking about. So in other words, when the object stops and then it shoots off again, we might not know, say, how far away that object is, but we will know, or we can get a apparent velocity by looking at the distance it travels in pixels of screen over a given amount of time. And from that, then we can calculate an apparent acceleration, right? So it goes from 0, say, to 10 pixels per second. Its apparent acceleration is, whatever it is, right? So we can calculate that then, right? And we can get other things too. We can calculate, the apparent force on the craft or whatever it is. We can calculate all those things and then figure out, well, what is this, right? Is this a meteor? Is it a piece of space garbage, right? There's actually, it's interesting. Most people don't really recognize how much garbage is just floating in our atmosphere. That stuff falls to Earth like with fairly regular frequency.
Yeah.
And the more stuff we put up there, the more an issue that will be, right? So there's applications for this outside of just looking for objects in the sky. So yeah, I think the videos are really interesting. They sort of I don't want people to go and now say, well, that's definitely a UFO in those videos. We have no idea what it is. But, we captured it that was like within a week of a unit being out there in Houston. So there's interesting stuff happening above you all the time. You just don't realize it. Is I guess really the takeaway from those videos. We had another example that's kind of funny. One of the team members is in the UK, and he had a skydiver above his house that triggered his camera. And he was like, I don't live near mountains. Like, where did the skydiver come from? And there he is. There's a skydiver in frame, and you're like, what the heck is going on here? And again, it's just part of that, right? There's weird stuff happening in your area all the time. And you don't realize it. And hopefully these cameras will capture more weird things like that.
Yeah. I think it also could have like really cool implications for meteorological data and stuff like that. So
absolutely. We are, one of our big goals for kind of this year, I guess, is to really reach out to and work with more scientific organizations and folks who are already doing this kind of data collection, but maybe not doing it in the way that we're doing it, right? So there's really great weather kind of stations that you can build on your house. Mm-hmm. If we could work alongside one of those, great. There's projects that SETI has in place for doing collecting data like this. There's projects that the meteor hunting groups do, or amateur astronomy groups. So there's a lot of really cool applications for this outside of just looking for stuff that might be aliens. Some of the coolest, actually in my mind, some of the coolest pictures we have are of bumblebees, and the paraglider is a favorite of mine. And then there's another kind of cool video we have of bird murmurations. So for those that kind of don't know, a murmuration is like a big flock of birds that sort of fly as one unit. And again, in Austria, we have a video of a bird murmuration that was captured, and the user was like, I don't think any birds around here do murmurations, He was like, what is this? And then we looked it up, and lo and behold, there's starlings that do them. And But it was, again, it's an interesting kind of thing, right? You really don't know what you'll capture with these. So
yeah, it's going to be fun to see what else you get.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get crazy things. I'm sure we'll get nuts stuff, Yeah, I'm sure we'll get nuts things. We talk about it back when I was with MUFON. We would talk about this case sometimes, that someone reported seeing a UFO, and they described it as like, it looked like a V-shaped craft with no middle. So almost like an A, but without a connector in the middle.
Okay.
And so this, or I guess boomerang is what the classical term would be. So boomerang-shaped craft. And one side of it looked to be kind of a weird kind of color, like almost striped. And the other side had polka dots, it looked like, or lights maybe. And there was a picture attached, and the interviewer, or the person who investigated this, had a one-word answer, or two-word answer, I should say, which was clown pants.
Clown pants?
They were clown pants. They had flown away somehow. Like someone had taken a picture of clown pants, or maybe they were trying to hoax or something. But it was quite a fun, one of my favorite cases of all time. Gotta say, is the clown pants case. The great clown pants UFO of 2015 or whatever year it was.
Oh my goodness. I hope they were trying to hoax. I don't want to, I don't want to judge or anything, but
no,
wow.
But we all hope so. We all frankly hope that they were just trying to hoax or something like that. Yeah.
So like we said earlier, anybody can get involved, and basically, if you get involved, you are kind of becoming a citizen scientist.
Yes.
Right. So what are, like, if somebody wanted to put a unit in their backyard, what kind of investment are they looking at for a unit?
So basically, these are costing right now. So, okay. First off, we are in very early alpha. So I don't want people to think that they're going to get one of these and it's going to immediately be working right out of the box. It takes a little bit of software and hardware knowledge to get one of these working right now. Now we're working to make it so that barrier is minimal. Right? There's basically, if you can install a program on a computer, you can install the software for Skyhub. But right now it requires a little bit of knowledge. So right now, as we're testing parts and cameras and things like that, the initial cost for a unit is somewhere in the range between, and again, it depends on the type of unit you buy with the camera and everything else, but it costs between like $600 to $1,000. Now, you don't have to get the highest end camera. You don't have to get the highest end Jetson. If you have, and we're constantly trying to find cheaper alternatives to these things. But I'm assuming, or I'm thinking, that the ultimate price point is going to land somewhere within that range. But so that kind of is the initial thing. Now, to make one, you basically get the camera, you get the Jetson itself, and then you get some other kind of cords and pieces you need. And then you follow our guide online to put it together. And then if you have an internet connection and a power source, you can put it out and have it running, basically. So it's kind of like installing a security camera. We also have, currently we're working on creating enclosures. So these nice kind of boxes that you can put the units in with all the electronics. So you can do that too. And yeah, that's kind of how someone would do this to start with.
Is there kind of a preferred location for these? I mean, the one in Houston, I think it said it was on a rooftop, but say you live out in rural Wendell, North Carolina, like I do.
Let's say, for example, you're in the Carolinas. Yeah, so the best place really to have them is someplace with an unobstructed view of the sky. So it doesn't really matter. It could be a rooftop. I live in an apartment I don't really live in an apartment complex. I live kind of like in a townhome complex kind of thing. So I don't have, I can't put mine on my roof, but I can put it in my front little kind of patio garden area, right? So mine still sees a bit of my house, but it can look out to the sky, if I position it and everything else. So really that's the best place to have them. We're working now and thinking about, and again, if you want to get involved in this and think about, how can we make units that are completely separate, right? So in other words, units that maybe use batteries and have solar panels, or units with Wi-Fi or whatever, please join the chat and help us. But so right now, really the limitation is, are you near a power source and are you near an internet source? Those are really the limitations for how you put them out there. Yeah.
Ooh, solar panels would be so cool.
Would be very cool, right? It'd be super sweet. Yeah, it would be very cool. So definitely something we would like to see happen if we could have it happen that way.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to touch on about Skyhub, like anything we haven't talked about yet?
More of that. I think it would be cool to have, it'd be good. We are always looking for people to help us in any way that they can. So if you're interested in this subject, or even just want to come chat with us and say hi, please join our chat. It really does help us. It helps make us better. It helps us ensure that we're answering people's questions that they have. So really, from my perspective, it's like the most important thing that we can have happening, right? Is getting people involved and talking to us. So, please, please just come work with us and help us. We'd love to have you on board. So that's it. That's really the main thing I want to touch on.
That's it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So before we end, give yourself a plug. Tell us about the Mad Scientist.
Yeah. So, come check out the show, the Mad Scientist Podcast. You can find us on Spreaker, on Spotify, on YouTube, all over the place. Just started on Twitch, actually, too, to play video games and stuff, so that should be pretty fun. And yeah, our show is released every week, approximately. COVID has kind of changed a little bit of that, but we're trying our best. And yeah, we talk about the science and philosophy behind the weird, and we think it'll be, we hope you like it, and we think it's quite a bit of fun. So yeah, come check us out.
Yeah, and I can vouch for that. I have a few favorite episodes of my own.
There we go. It's great.
And the one that just dropped this past week, man, the astrobiologist, people have got to listen to him. He was mind-blowing.
He's so cool. Isn't he awesome? Like he is
so good.
He's one of my favorite people we ever had on the show. He's so cool.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody check out The Mad Scientist. Very cool.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on and telling us about Skyhub. I've had a few people reach out to me because I have mentioned it in previous episodes about why I think it's important, but hadn't really been active on the chat in a while because when I decided to launch a podcast and work on at least one of the novels that I've started, suddenly I didn't have any time.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I can imagine. No worries at all. Please, you are so good. Yeah, I'm so happy to come on, and anytime I can come on, let me know for sure.
Definitely. I'm sure we'll have other things to talk about in the future.
Absolutely. All right, cool. Well, have a good night then.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay.
Thanks again, Chris, for taking time to talk with me about Skyhub. Again, if you haven't checked out the Mad Scientist podcast, please do. You'll learn so much. Thanks always to you, dear listener, for listening. If you have an idea for a show topic, you can fill out the contact form at peeppodcast.com. That's PEEP podcast.com. Remember, that stands for People Experiencing Everyday Paranormal. If I can find a study about it, I'll be happy to use it. You can keep up with the show on its Facebook page, facebook.com/peeppodcast. We also have a group now linked from that page. Join the conversation over there. If you like the podcast, please give it some rating love on your favorite podcast app. Share it with friends and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Doing so will also help the podcast be found by others. If you're interested in supporting the show financially, I've set up a Patreon page at patreon.com/Nicolle. Patrons will receive special thanks and humble perks. You can also look for the Peep Podcast shop at tpublic.com for t-shirts and other merchandise. No matter how you support the show, listening, telling others about it, Patreon, or sporting a tee, I really just appreciate your being here. Thanks again. Stay safe and be well.
Wow.